Good evening. Good evening. How are everyone doing today? Thank you so much for joining us. The New Mexico Office of African Americans is so pleased to partner with the New Mexico Black Voters Collaborative on this event tonight. This is the Black Political Engagement event. We are working towards amplifying Black voices in decision-making spaces. We've got a very exciting evening tonight, and we want to, we're going to first introduce our moderator, who is Mason Graham, who is the Special Projects Lead for the New Mexico Black Voters Collaborative, where he works to provide informational resources, facilitates voter outreach efforts, and creates programs and events for BIPOC voters here in New Mexico. Mason is also part of the New Mexico Black Leadership Council, where he helps lead the marketing and communications department, as well as support several other projects and programs. Mason is an active member and activist for the Black communities of Albuquerque, New Mexico. He engages closely with Black community leaders and members to create new opportunities for visibility, recognition, and change for our city and state. We are so proud to have Mason as the moderator of our first panel and really helping us amplify Black voices here in New Mexico. Mason.
Thank you so much, Amy. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this very hot New Mexico night. We're excited to have you here for our very important Black political engagement panel featuring our Black elected officials of New Mexico. And so this evening, we'll be joined by our Black elected leaders that represent our vibrant multicultural communities and legislature. And what's so special about what we're doing tonight is that we're able to provide you all with some background about the challenges, the successes, and the opportunities that come with being one of the few Black elected officials. Now, we all know that in the Black community, representation is extremely important. And when we have leaders that look like us and understand the struggles of being African American in a state where we're barely 3% of the population, there's an opportunity there for our communities to gain a seat at the table where previously there may not have been one. So I'm happy to introduce our panelists tonight. So we have joining us State Senator Harold Pope Jr. We also have our State Representative Cheryl Williams Stapleton and City Councilor of Roswell, New Mexico, Angela Moore. Now we were going to have State Representative Jane Palgel Colbert join us as well, but she did get held up in a previous meeting. So we're hoping that she might be able to hop on a little bit later. So thank you guys all for your time and for taking the next hour to talk about your experience as the Black leadership here in New Mexico. Why don't we go ahead and get started? So I sent you all some categories that we're going to be going over, just talking about your experiences. And I'd love to just kind of make it a little bit of a conversation, talking about, what it feels like to be, a Black elected official here in New Mexico. And so to get started, I want to talk about what it means to decide to run for office. And the first question is really, what was the catalyst to making your decision to run for office? So I'd actually like to start with Ms. Moore here, because I was reading up on you a little bit, and it seemed like you didn't plan to run for office. It kind of just fell into place. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
How do you know all that? That's kind of what happened. A friend of mine was running. She decided she was the first Black elective, and she decided she wanted to run for mayor. And she said, well, I need somebody to go with me, just walk around with me a little bit and, just meet the people or whatever. And so I ended up walking in, and one of the ladies asked me to run. And I was like, nah, I ain't gonna win. I don't have that kind of time. I'm not a politician. That's what I said. I'm not a politician. And so I'm a teacher, so I'm not a politician. And so I ended up running, and she didn't win mayor, but I ended up winning my seat. And it was different. It was very different. And it was a very different atmosphere. And I still like to say I'm not a politician. I'm a person. And so it was difficult, and it was difficult it was a difficult process for me. So that's all.
Wow.
I'm one, and I'm 4 years in. It's getting time to run again.
Yeah. So you planning to run for re-election?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. So Representative William Stapleton, so you're actually the longest serving member here tonight. You've been running since serving since 1995. What was it like to make a decision to run for office at that time when there was really just like a handful of Black people engaged in politics at that time, especially here in New Mexico?
Engaged in politics, but not elected.
Right.
It was okay for me because I was comfortable making the decision to run. I didn't initially took the step forward and said, I'm going to run, but the individual that had the seat, he had decided that he was not going to run anymore. And he called a community meeting in our neighborhood and he invited me to the meeting, but I had no clue. I just thought it was a regular community meeting to talk about something in the community, because we did that often enough as a core group within our community in my district. And so I attended the meeting and everybody was there. And then the individual said, Representative Hawk, Robert Hawk, he announced that I am going to retire from the legislature. We were all making small talking groups and everything. And then when the meeting came together, he said, I plan to retire from the legislature. And I have with us today my replacement.
And so on the spot there.
And so we all looked around at each other, but I was the youngest person there. And so he said, there's my replacement, and he pointed to me. However, prior to that, I was very active. I had been state party chair, state party vice chair, precinct chair, I advocated in my community for senior citizens and Tough Love program with Judge Tommy Jewell, who is live a block away from me. So I was active in my community, and my constituents saw the need and decided to select me out to decide to run, and that's how I got involved. I also got involved because of education, because I was definitely 100% involved in educational union issues. And I had been working with the union in regards to teacher salary and reduction in classroom sizes at the time.
Wow. So it seems like you were in the right place at the right time, and it's really paid off for you. Because still, even in 2021, you're doing amazing work there at the Roundhouse. So if you guys on the call don't know, we have State Senator Harold Pope Jr. with us, who is our first African-American state senator. So Senator Pope, we've been able to have quite a few conversations. And I want to ask you the same question about kind of what the catalyst was for making a decision to run for office, but also, was there a specific reason that you decided to run for the position that you're in now for the state Senate?
So, I never really thought of it as an option, but serving in the military was limited on what type of support I could do. And so I always contributed to, members of the Democratic Party and to folks that I supported. And what ended up happening was right before I retired, I was supporting Representative Joy Garrett here that ended up joining the House. She had run for the Senate in 2016. And we just had conversations, and she pretty much told me that I should run for Senate and that she was going to stay in the House. And if I did that, she would support me. And I thought about it for a little while, but basically I thought, hey, I'm here helping other candidates. I got to know some of the other candidates. And in the end, I felt I could do just as good a job or even better. So that's when I decided to step up and run. It wasn't a difficult choice, but it was a scary choice in the sense that I don't know anyone really in politics except people like our majority leader, but like no one in my family. So this was a whole new endeavor, doing this. And you don't know if you're going to win or you're going to lose. You go in with confidence that you're going to work hard to win. But I think that was really the catalyst. And I just, in the end, you think that you're the best person for the job and that you're going to do better and serve your community. I didn't know till after I announced that I was actually going to be the first elected Black state senator if I won, so that wasn't really the pool. That was some added incentive. I let other folks talk about that. Our focus was just on winning and getting out to the community. And luckily, just the work I had done prior, and not the nonprofit world, some of the community boards, people had already known me. I wasn't a person that just showed up and said, I'm going to run for office. And I think that was also a key, because you're, in essence, even though I wasn't running before, in a way I was just, talking with the community and working for them, in other avenues. So that's what led me to run.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we're all really pleased that you did win that election. And I think it suits you like perfectly. So in that same vein, I want to ask all of you guys, starting with you, Senator Pope, since you are the first African-American state senator, what's the significance of you being an African-American in your position now?
Well, I think the significance is, there's always the talk of us having a seat at the table. I even hate saying that because it's almost saying it was never our table and we just never had a place. But we need to be there. And when I first walked in the Senate, that's when it really first hit me, going into the roundhouse before swearing in. You walk around the roundhouse, you see the pictures of folks. And on the Senate side, there's no one that looks like us, So that's when it really hit me, and that's the significance. Now, I will say there are some allies there in the Senate, but allies can never know really what we feel in our stories. I can't even say that. I mean, even as an African-American community, right, we're not a monolith, right? So I can understand it and have a lot more empathy even for folks that have a little different story than I do, right? So I think that's what I bring. And when we talk about the bills that I was fortunate to sponsor, from the hard work from Majority Leader Stapleton, like the Black Education Act, it just gave us a voice in the Senate to tell that story, to get it across to folks on the Senate floor of why these bills that in some cases impact our community, why they're so important. And we just need to be there, because otherwise we're from the outside almost begging or asking for help. We need to be there. We need to have that voice there. And that's why it was so important.
Awesome. Now, Councilor Moore, same question for you. And, I'm really interested because I know Roswell is historically known as being a place in New Mexico. I wouldn't say a lot of people would think a lot of Black people came from there or are really working there. So what is it like being an African-American in your position serving in Roswell?
It's very different. I think most of the time during these past 4 years, my biggest battle was trying to get other people like us involved. Because, you go to any meeting and I'm the only one there. I go to any state events, I'm the only one there. And so it's difficult. I go to the different churches and try to, get people involved, and everybody keeps saying, we need to get involved. We need to get involved, but no one does. And that was one of the reasons I ran. And I was like, because I was fussing about something, and somebody said, and I said, well, if I can fuss from my couch, I can fuss at the table, and make it mean something. And that's kind of that was the final thing that made me decide to go ahead and run. If I can't change anything sitting on my sofa, and my voice can't be heard sitting on the sofa. And so it became very difficult because there's always a pushback for anything that, that I try to go forth, anything that we try to do, there's always pushback, because and anything racial, they ask me like I'm the answer to all, the answer for every racial issue. That I'm supposed to have the answer for every, Black problem, concern in America. I'm supposed to be able to, what do you think about the police fight? What do you think? It's not just how can we fix it, whatever, but how do the Black people feel about, and so that began to be an issue. I fought against that. I want to be known as a person at the table. I am of color and I'm proud to be Black and proud of who I am, but I cannot, I can't answer all those questions for you. I tell the mayor the very same thing. You need to go ask the people yourself. I can't answer those questions for you. And since I was the second one, and come to find that we're way different, the one that left before me, we were way different. And so they were like, well, she didn't say much. I said, well, until I know what I'm talking about. Well, I know what I'm talking about when I start talking to you, when you start giving some pushback and I'm not just shaking my head. Because the first year I felt like I was just shaking my head because I didn't know what was going on. There's no manual. There's no, no help. They give you this big old notebook about this tall. When I walked into the first, do my swearing in, and I got a giant notebook and I'm supposed to know all that by the next meeting 2 weeks later. And so it took a while to get into knowing what you want. I know what I wanted to fight for. I knew what was important to me, but that's different. Knowing what's important to me and how to fight for it, how to stand up for it was two different things.
Wow.
It was difficult, and there's still battles and there were still fights. I was shot at. I had guns pulled on me when we was walking around. We had dogs sicked on us, all kinds of stuff while we were doing the campaign and during that year. It was just nonsense, so
wow.
And there's enough of us to make a difference, but they don't come together, then it's very hard.
Wow, that's an amazing perspective. Representative William Stapleton, what do you think about that? What do you think about what it's like being the longest serving African American in New Mexico?
Dr. Linton Mallory was in the House before me, and as the first African American elected to the New Mexico legislature. And then I became the first African American woman elected to the New Mexico legislature. And I have been serving for quite a long time. I'm the longest serving in the House of Representatives currently. And to me, it seems like a short time. And not that long of a time to be the one that is the longest serving. It takes patience. It takes determination, persistence, and it takes turning the other cheek many times, not only in the legislature, but also in the neighborhoods. When you knock on the doors, when you're going around asking for that vote, and having the door slam in your face, having told, don't come in my yard. So it's okay. It's okay to run for office, but you have to have that backbone to want to stand up and accept some of the things and shake them off. And shake them off and move on to the next step. And don't let it pull you down. And build that foundation around you with people who you trust and has loyalty with, because there's a gold and a rainbow at the end of the tunnel. And that is when you pass legislation that is meaningful. I go to the National Conference of Black Legislators, and when I say that we have an Office of African American Affairs, and saying this to states like Alabama and Georgia and Mississippi and Tennessee and all those states that have highly populated African Americans, And their question is, how did you do it? We have had African Americans in the legislature for many years, and unfortunately do not have such a process. How did you get the the African American Performing Arts Center? How did you pass in 2006 the Juneteenth law that just became federal law, but was passed in 2006 in New Mexico? How did you do it? And so those are some of the things for our community that I'm proud of to say it's worth it to be in the legislature, where those categories of items and issues and locations and may not have never happened. Moving forward to produce more additional funding for Black student services at NMSU and UNM and African Studies Department may never have come about, because when I first got elected and I was trying to get funding for them, I was told it's not on the list. But it's never on the list. It doesn't get on the list unless you make it and put it on that list. And you gotta have that structure, that will to say, I'm gonna get it done. And sometimes you don't. So it's a matter of persistence, determination to say that I want this and this is what we're gonna do. And this is how we're gonna get it done. But you cannot get it done alone. You gotta have resources behind you. What I'm talking about in resources is not in money and paper and pen, it's people. You don't do it alone. Whether it's African Americans, Anglos, Hispanics, Native Americans, or Asians, it's having a unified group, natives, whoever it is having individuals, no matter who they are, no matter what color they are, believing in the issues that you believe in and want to get accomplished. Because you have to widen your scope, widen your opportunities of where you want things to take place, and not just something that related to African Americans, but something that related to New Mexicans. Issues that affect a better quality of life for all New Mexicans. And you got to go in with that thought and come out with the thought that I'm building a foundation for all of us to have a better life in New Mexico. And by doing that, it enables me to fortify myself with others who we can work together to accomplish goals that our community needs.
So if you guys at home are listening and you don't have a fire lit under you right now, then I don't know if you're really paying attention to this, because I definitely agree with that. It does take community, and just with the Juneteenth celebration that we got to celebrate here in Civic Plaza was amazing. But I think that was one of the like better things about New Mexico that we can recognize, is that it has been a long-standing holiday for us. And other states, they're still trying to catch up. Well, now we have it as a federal holiday, but in regards to African American leadership and representation, I still think that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done there.
Sir, can I say something to Mr.
Absolutely.
Said? I appreciate that comment because at the first year I was so distressed and was, I can't do this, didn't want to fight. But you begin to think about when you see things happen and things come about, so not to get discouraged, everybody, I kept saying I wasn't going to run again because I couldn't take all this meanness and bigotry and all this. But I really appreciate your comment about the purpose of why I was there. There's going to be a battle. We always fight, and we have always been a people that has had to fight. It wasn't always never easy for us mostly. So I think that your comment was just to get some people behind me, and I think that's kind of what is my hardest thing, is getting people behind you, because no one understands what you go through. You know, it's something, this is something different. It's not like going to the committee or whatever. This is something, we're making decisions for our city. We're making decisions. And so the idea of getting some people behind me and finding some help is something I think I want to work on a lot better than I did before, because it makes sense if you have a few people to go. If you just take 2 or 3 people with you, you know, each page in the meeting, then you have some background and some support. You can say some things and do some things when you know you have some people behind you that you couldn't do when it's just you standing up for yourself saying, I want this on the agenda. No, I want this on the agenda. But if you have a few people that'll back you up, then they'll put it on the agenda. So I thank you for that comment. I appreciate that.
Awesome. So that makes me moving on to my next question, because it makes me think about the period of time that we're in right now in regards to race relations, and then the period of time that you all were elected. So like Senator Pope, I know you were running at the end of the Trump presidency when he was running for his reelection. Councilor Moore, you were running right at the end of the Obama era, and then Representative William Stapleton, you've seen it all. So tell me a little bit about, what did you expect as an African-American running for office, and were there fears there? Let's start with Senator Pope, since you're the most recent.
You know, there weren't really fears. There's always, you know, worries, because you want to win. And when I say I want to win and I don't want to lose, you don't want to disappoint people. You know, you have your community, you have your family. And just as the majority leader said, it's not about me running, it's about we running.
Yeah.
And you need to have that support. So one of the things I think is important for folks to know, when you do run, you know, you need to understand that they're going to come at you with everything, your personal life, family, friends, associates. But then we have us as African Americans. So in my race, right, it was at the end of the Trump era. It was for reelection. And of course, it was going to be the normal, Harold wants to do this. He doesn't support law enforcement. He wants to defund the police. He's, you know, they're going to try to target you with all these negative things to get people that would support you to not support you. And let's be honest here, they're going to do that to Democrats, but they're also going to do that because I'm a Black man, right? And they're going to hope that that sticks. So these are things that you really have to worry about in your community, and when you run, that they're going to do that to you. For me, I had, in essence, I had kind of some protection with that, with my background, being a retired Air Force officer, right? Like, so people had to say, well, this guy, you know, has a background, and, you know, that we can't really label him with that, but they were going to try that, and they were going to do that. And I guarantee you, there will be something else in 2 years. There will be something else in 4 years, to where they're going to try to use that to play, in essence, some racial politics. So that's something that you really have to worry about. You have to really stay strong, build that, reach out to that community that you've built before you've been running, and get that support so people really know who the real you is. So when those mailers go out, all that nonsense on social media, people know the real you. So I think that's just something that we struggle with. I'd also say that a lot of people just don't know what this takes. It's a lot of fundraising, it's a lot of phone calls, and it's reaching out to your family and friends, and that's tough. You know, we running in a pandemic where you couldn't even knock on doors. It was a huge struggle. And if you just decided to do this and you didn't build that community and that network, you would not have been able to run a good campaign in the pandemic. You just would not have been able to. But we need to continue also to have discussions like this to not only build that community, because I'm going to be honest with you, sometimes we don't support each other when we run. We really don't. We need to do more. But we need to get more of us to run, but we need to give you all the information to make sure that when you decide to run, you know what you're getting into and that you're getting that support. Because It's not easy, and I'm not saying that to scare folks, but this is not something that you just decide at a whim. It isn't like, oh, there's an open seat, I'll put my name or I'm going to run. That's not how it works. So.
Councilor Moore, you shared a little bit of your experience, running. Were you expecting that kind of reaction? And did you think that your race was going to be a factor in your success or your failure?
No. The crazy thing is most people know me, so they were like, well, you're going to win. They know you. They know your son. Your name means something. But it was difficult when it started happening. I got kind of like, are there really people really acting like that? And like I said, because I grew up in Roswell, been in Roswell most of my life, so I know a lot of people. I know the people, and I know the people in my ward, the district that I serve. So that part wasn't. It was just shocking because I went to places I hadn't normally. We went to places that I didn't know people. That's where I feel like we should go, where you don't know as many people. You know what I mean? Because they still have to vote. And so I think one of the most hurtful thing that happened during my election is when I won. Me and the lady that I was running with, we were at one place, and I got a call from the other lady, and the comment came out. The lady that I beat said, they told her, "You let that nigger beat you." Those words were told to me the night that I won the election, is that you let that nigga beat you. And then another came, the lady said, "Oh, you only won because they thought you were me." What? Because her last name is Moore. Her name is Andrea Moore. So she thought, so they thought you were me. That's the only reason you won. And so in that battle, that just made me want to fight a little harder to be there and prove to them that I was there for a reason. Initially there wasn't, just because it's not always how you start, it's how you finish. So I kind of thought that, okay, I'll show them. And so that's why I stayed in, and I decided to run again, because I want the things that I decided to run for. I hadn't seen anything come to fruition. So I want to be there long enough to make the things that I said I wanted to work for. I wanted to do things for our young people and stuff like that. So I decided to stay around because of that. Now, you think, he said, I think it may be easier at our lower level than it is at the Senate to think, you just run just because. But and that kind of made me feel bad when he said that, because I was like, well, I think I really did this time. But I'm going in with a different mind frame now. And so I hope that makes a difference to, the people. And then when we're out in Juneteenth, people are talking about it and know the election's coming. Everybody wants to know when I'm running or what's going to happen. And so that felt pretty good. But Roswell, they low key bigots, they're not, it's not always out in the open and stuff like that. So, at the table where I sit, the 10 of us, there's 10 of us in the mayor. We have, I guess, one of the largest city councils that there are in the state. It becomes difficult, because it's always the same split battle for each thing that we're arguing about. So, and it's never for anything positive. And they're so, I don't like the demeaning people's character, like he was saying, you hear about that a lot, she does this and she does that. And, and I don't like that. That's what I call the politic of it. I don't like that part of it. Don't judge my character, make my decisions, not my character, not my person, not the color of my skin. So it begins to be a battle, but you gotta put your big girl jaws on and do what you have to do. And the reason why we're here for the people. I'm not here for myself. Like you said, it's for the citizens of Roswell. So I have to do my best.
Absolutely. I think we would all agree that you're doing your absolute best. And no matter what, like Representative William Stapleton said, like, it's having that community behind you that can support you when things are getting rough or when you feel like you're not making as much traction as you want, I think is really important. So Representative William Stapleton, after serving for as long as you have, what kind of changes in the way that our government runs, and like what kind of attitude changes have you experienced, especially within these last, say, like 4 or 5 years?
Well, I just wanted you to know, and individuals to know, it hasn't been an easy road. It's not been, and I don't take this election any election that I do lightly or that I perform in, because I have had good races, tough races, hard races, um, races with no opposition, and races with opposition, both in primary and general. And I have had election with every race of an individual running against me, and all race running against me. Our race as African Americans running against me in a primary and in a general election. So when individuals decides to run, they're running for different reasons. I ran because I'm an educator, and I ran because I was teaching at the time at Wilson Middle School, and I was concerned about the drug situation and the gang infested situation within our neighborhoods and around our schools. I was concerned about our teachers' salary. I was concerned about overcrowded classroom. I was concerned about our senior citizens. I was concerned about healthcare. So there were issues that surrounded my life and the future of my children who live, born, and raised in New Mexico, that I wanted to make sure that there was a pathway for them. And so based on those things, I picked up my heels, took off my shoes and put on my sneakers, and I walked the walk and did the talk in my neighborhoods to my neighbors and friends. But I want you to know that before all that, I was a teacher in the classroom. I was a teacher in the classroom in my district and taught in schools within my district. And because of that, many of those children that I taught in elementary school, when I was attacked a few years ago, they had moved out of the state. They had moved to other states. Their parents still live in my district. And when they heard of the attacks against me running for office, they came home in droves. They came back home to their families and to their mothers and fathers. And they came to my house and they walked the streets for me and they knocked on the doors for me. And these were students that I had in kindergarten, elementary school, first grade, second grade, all the way up to fifth grade. Students that I had in middle school and high school. And having been taught these students, they were excited to come back and say, that's not, when they read and heard the things that were against me a few years ago, they came back to say, that is not the Senora Williams they know. That is not Miss Williams. And so they knocked on the doors and tell their neighbors and friends who I am and what they thought about me. So, you know, I can really say to you, it takes a village for everything, but it takes who you are and people knowing what you represent and how you can make a difference. And it's because of that difference, whether it's for African Americans, Native Americans, or Asian Americans, or whoever the group is, or New Mexicans, whatever it is, because you can make a difference, individuals would seek to re-elect you to office. Because I'm telling you, if you don't know the history, it's out there on social media, it's out there on Facebook that shows that I was under attack a few years ago. Extreme attacks. But by the grace of God, there go I. So politics can be nasty, devious, but you gotta know, you gotta like it. to say that it can be fun and enjoyable. And you got to work and you got to work and you got to give up time. But in the end, in the end, and in the end, and in the end, you can succeed and you can feel good about the things you're doing because you can see the light at the end of the tunnel for the future of New Mexicans, for the future of our children, for the future of education. I don't need to talk about the various bills that are passed, but I can tell you, over the years, there have been plenty that makes a difference, whether it's crime prevention in Albuquerque or whether it's healthcare for New Mexicans. There are differences, and we just got to know that we want to do it. You got to have a desire to want to do it. And after 20 something years, and after 27 years, I can't say that I'm not a politician.
Absolutely. So we're coming near the hour here. And so what I want to talk about is engaging the community. And, you bring up some great points you all have about what it means to be American in your position. It's not an easy road. It's definitely not something that you just stumble upon. So I have a kind of two questions here. What do we need for more people like us to run for office in New Mexico? And why don't you think there aren't as many African Americans in our position now? Let's start with Senator Pope. Sorry, muted.
Sorry about that. So I would look at it the perspective of the legislature. And I would say first off, I think we need a paid legislature. We get per diem during the session or when we're in, interim meetings, but I really believe that is one of the barriers because even right now, I'm doing constituent services, folks are calling me, but I have the luxury of having my military retirement to pay my bills. So I really wonder how folks can do this job well, still work, and not really be able to give their all to their constituents. And I don't say that to knock on anyone that's doing that because I know they're all doing a great job. They're all putting their heart into it. But I think that hurts New Mexicans, what we can do for them, but also limits the pool of people like us serving. So think about it. You're not paid. You're just getting per diem during the session. What job is going to allow you to take 30 to 60 days off? And for the most part in the state, most people are working for the city, county, or the state anyway, and they're not even allowed to run. So it's really made it a small pool for us to get opportunities to serve, especially our young folks. So I think that's an area we need to change. Second, I think the elected officials that we have now, we just have to do some more outreach and to find ways to give you the information and mentor folks and support you when you do decide to run. That needs to happen. I'm not saying it didn't happen for me, but me being here on the West Side in a swing district, being a 3-term Republican, in a lot of ways, there weren't a lot of people out here in this district to help me. So we got to find better support systems, even having events like this, just having the conversation of what it means. But I really believe things like paid legislature, public financing, to me, those are, and then the mentorship are ways that we're going to get more African Americans serving as elected officials.
Thank you. Councilor Moore, I'd actually the same question. How are we going to get more African Americans into office, and what do you think are some of the biggest barriers?
The pay for legislators, I see that because I think there's of the 10 of us, only 2 of us work, and so the rest of them don't work. So, and we don't get a per diem; we get a little monthly check. But you could not be able to, I would not be able to do this job and not have a job. I understand that part. I like the mentor part of it. I just I had asked I had even asked the mayor when we started, why couldn't we have some young people that we mentor, or we have some type of, gatherings or something and get some young people, because I don't think a lot of Black people don't believe that there's no buy-in. They feel like there's no buy-in. I do have one person, they say, I'll run because they saw, I never saw anyone like me in office, so it wasn't just, oh, there's a lot of us. So it wasn't that. So I think the more we begin to see us, the more you get to see people that look like us, the more that, the young people will, but if the young people don't feel like they got any skin in the game, they don't care, they don't. So until we give them something to buy into and to understand or put a hold on, they can, then they're not gonna get in on it. But the barriers are always going to be there, and you already know that we're always going to have those barriers, and we just have to just continue to, like I said before, just kind of forge through, the type of barrier. But I think the mentor thing is a great idea, getting other people involved and seeing things, and that's my biggest thing about going around to different places, is because I want the people to see, you can do this too. It's not just, let's work this out. You have an idea, bring it, and and I started having little group meetings for the people in my neighborhood and stuff, just trying that outside of what the city was doing, because I feel like if you don't see what's going on, and most people don't research it or go look or anything. So if you bring it to their neighborhood and they can see what's going on, they begin to see some change, then they'll get a little buy-in. That's what I think. I think we just need more buy-in from from the people of color, because they can instead of be about, because a lot of them say, I'm gonna come, or I'll be there, and then they don't show up, or spend a lot of time doing invites and doing other things, and they still don't show. So it's disconcerting, it's disconcerting sometimes, but you got to keep doing what you're doing and know that, it's for the best.
Absolutely. And so, Representative William Stapleton, actually, you can close us out. So let us know what you also think about how we can get more African Americans in the position to run, and how we could break down some of those barriers.
They have got to be a part of the community in which they live, and be active, be involved, and want to make the time, because it's difficult. It's difficult to serve. My dad, a few years ago, I went to visit my dad in New York, and he looked at me and he said, Mija, meaning my daughter, I heard that you work without pay. And I don't know who told him that I work without pay, but he was referring to the legislature. And like Senator Polk said, legislators need to be paid. It's difficult, especially for African Americans, to decide to run if they don't have a support base financially to rely on. Because the per diem they give you, if you stay in Santa Fe and you stay in a decent hotel and you have to buy your meals and you have to put gas in your car, or you have to go back and forth, it's not enough. And so people are gonna juggle whether they want to put food on their table, keep a roof over their head and their family's head, versus serving to be a public servant and not receiving any return personally for them, but yet at the same building a foundation for others. So it's a two-edged sword. And all I can say is, it's not an easy road to travel. If you're retired and you're receiving a paycheck and you want to run for office after you've done all that you decided to do, then it seems more reasonable and more feasible. But if you're working like I am, and you are serving in the legislature, it can be very tough on your family and on yourself. So a lot of African Americans may not have the means to do that. One, and then perhaps the district in which they live in is not quite the type of district with the kind of votes that would get them elected. And you have to work. In my case, it's every 2 years. I am stomping the ground and knocking on doors and talking to people and raising money to pay out for flyers and materials and booklets and getting people to the polls to vote and all that. It's a lot of work. And during the interim, you're dealing with many constituents, for example, unemployment right now. And many of them are calling, many of them are emailing, many of them are not getting their checks. Many of them are having issues. And because we're out of the legislature during the time in Santa Fe does not mean that we're not working. You have problems with houses, with Social Security, with not getting their paycheck, they can't pay their rent, all those kind of issues we have to face. And when you decide to run, you have to give up your time to take care of the public because you ran to do that. And sometimes some individuals may not have that capability to do that, but are encouraged to run for office anyway. But you have to make sure it's the right time and the right place and the right district to run.
Thank you so much. All your responses were superb. I really appreciate having you guys on tonight, and hopefully it was informative for everybody who joined us as well. It's really a pleasure talking with all of you, and we really do appreciate all the hard work that you guys are putting in, that you've done over the years, and we just hope that you can continue to provide a better future for everyone in New Mexico, and I know that you're going to do exactly that. If you could take the time to maybe drop some contact information in the chat, because I think some people might have some questions after the fact. But until then, thank you so much. We really appreciate everything that you said tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and shift gears to our the next part of our Black Empowerment Forum. And who we have as moderator now is Devin Williams from the Office of African American Affairs. So Devin Williams is a social and community outreach coordinator with the State Office of African American Affairs. And in this role, Devin looks to conduct community outreach for all aspects of the African American community in New Mexico, including collaboration with community stakeholders, programs and initiatives, and policy and advocacy. Before joining OAAA in 2019, Devin worked for 4 years for a diverse range of organizations, including Sports and Wellness, University of New Mexico, and Albuquerque Public Schools. Devin also completed his Bachelor in Communication and Master's in Sports Admin in the years before joining the Office of African American Affairs. Devin varied background in K-12 education, post-secondary education, and organizations in the private sector provided the perfect foundation for understanding the community and helping them navigate systems and organizations in New Mexico successfully. So Devin's going to lead our community advocacy panel. Devin, I'm going to let you go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Mason. And a huge thank you to all of our elected officials. It is important to have representation within decision-making spaces, and we appreciate you taking that on. Also, it is important for Blacks to be represented in other decision-making spaces. Our next panel highlights the many places that our voices can be amplified within the community. Community members advocating in policy-making spaces and engaging community in advocacy. We are happy to bring together this panel of strong voices. On this panel today, we have Nikki Archuleta, an activist that has worked with countless organizations. Her work has moved forward policy and understanding. She is the creator of Albuquerque Arts Collective, a platform for local artists to share their talents while raising money. We also have Joseph Cotton, president of the Hobbs NAACP and the statewide president. He has been active in movement for change. His reach is in community advocacy, and he sits on numerous city and state boards advocating within those systems. Next, we have Erica Davis Crump, who has been leading political communications and organizing efforts moving forward policy. Most recently, as a lead in the anti-hair discrimination policy that passed this legislative session. We also have Nichelle Gilbert, Associate Director of Partnership for Community Action, works towards building movements. Her role highlights the importance of building organizations ready to advocate and modeling, including community in action. We also have Torrance Green, the co-founder of the Black New Mexico movement. He is working on bridging the gap between the community and those who represent and serve it. And last, but certainly not least, we have Sunshine Muse, Executive Director and Project Lead for the Black Health New Mexico. Her work navigates policy and decision-making while ensuring community engagement and acknowledging history. We're very happy to have you all joining us today. And so to get started, I'd like to first start off by asking, what does being a Black community advocate mean for you? And I'd like to ask Erica Davis to please open the floor.
Hey, everybody. It is an honor to be in space with everyone today. To our political leaders in office, we all want to give you a round of applause, give you your flowers. We love you. We are so grateful for each of you and the way that y'all blaze the trail for us. You are such great examples for our community. So I definitely want to give honor and space to that. But the question was, what does being a community organizer mean to me?
Mm-hmm. Or mean for you?
It's my life. This is what I do. I've been here for 34 years. I am a Black Burqueña all day long. I'm from 98th and Tower area, which, if y'all know the area, that's where we at. And from there to the Kirk to, all over certain parts of the city, the Sticks, Edith, like that's where we are. So being from here and being a grown up and now being a mother, I have 2 teenagers, and being the steward of their lives is also a very consuming thing. And so the world that I want to live in, I have to organize and move accordingly for our highest and best. And one thing that Ava DuVernay says is that if your dream just includes you, your dream is too small. And so one of the things that I stand by is, first of all, standing with Black women first, foremost, and always. Listening to our leaders, Majority House Leader, Representative William Stapleton, and my family, Mrs. Moore down in Roswell, Miss Moore down in Roswell, hearing the atrocities that they go through, even with Senator Pope. We actually need protection. So what does a safe, secure space mean for Black New Mexicans specifically? Because being a Black New Mexican is very specific and extremely unique. So in organizing and advocacy, it shows up in the Free the Hair Act, which the New Mexico Black Central Organizing Committee just passed alongside of our 2 champions, Senator Pope and Representatives William Stapleton. It's the Black Education Act. It is repealing the abortion ban that was old and archaic. And, really restrictive of bodily autonomy for Black and Indigenous people specifically. So being a community organizer means centering Black women. It means trusting our leadership. And it means knowing that when you center us, we're going to make sure that we block and protect and lead and blaze the trail for everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you, Erica. And I think it's very powerful what you said in terms of if it's just a dream for you, then it's a dream that's too small. And I believe, you know, with the work that you and the Central Organizing Committee, along with our legislators, have done to pass all the different acts that you mentioned, I think is very powerful and amazing. And I appreciate the work that you and all the others involved have done. And so I'd like to pass it on to Sunshine, if you could elaborate a little bit more on the question.
Hey everybody, I'm really pleased to be here. It's so nice to see your faces and to become more aware of where you're standing and sitting in the work that you're doing. I feel the same way that I just want to give honor to our elected officials that are Black and serving the state of New Mexico. Your testimonies were so powerful. The work that you do is sacrificial. The environment that you do it in is troubling. And I just, you know, I'm very curious after listening to you how we can work with you more closely as community advocates to make sure that we are sheltering one another and creating, as Erica said, a safe space to continue to do this work. So I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge how touched I was by what was shared and just honoring that it sounds hard, not just to run and win, but to survive in an environment that wasn't designed for us. I'm really happy to be an outsider, in the sense that I was mentored by an Afro-Caribbean Latina woman from Central America who told me very early on that it's because of the outsiders that the insiders can exist. And it takes the insiders, because of what they do, the outsiders can continue to push. So she taught me in my early 20s that we have to bond together in a meaningful and intentional collaboration to make this work. What it means to me to be a community organizer is to represent the lived experiences of people that live and walk in my shoes, that look like me, that have grown like me, that deserve a better condition under which to live and thrive. And the truth is that the way that this country was founded was not meant for us to do well. And we haven't had reform. And I was on, you know, the Civic Plaza, and I loved what I experienced. I thought it was so beautifully organized, and I was so grateful to be in that space where it was majority Black for that moment. But I want to highlight the fact that the slogan was free-ish. And that's a problem. And to Erica's point, Ava DuVernay, she teaches us a lot, and she's taught us that slavery has not been abolished in the United States of America. And so we're just swimming in this really crazy place. And it's the love and respect and knowledge that we have for each other that allows us to survive and continue to push forward. So that love, respect, knowledge of each other, that standing for the experience of people who are me and who look like me, who've come before me and who will come after me. That's what it means to me to be a community organizer.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sunshine. And I just also want to point out, thank you for saying that it takes not only the people on the inside, but also on the outside. Like, we have to have a holistic approach and a collective effort in addressing these issues and creating these safe spaces. And so I really appreciate you acknowledging that. And so I'd like to pass it on to Nikki.
Hi, everyone. I hope everybody is doing great on this hot, what is it, Monday? I almost said Tuesday. I'm so thankful to hold this space. I'm very grateful, especially with the Black women in this space. It's always healing for me, always. But what does being a community organizer mean to me? And I think for me, that means to be unwavering in my fight. I think I've learned a lot, but I think, you know, what I've really taken is that when Black women lead, we get it done. when people listen to Black women, when people take a step back and let us lead, we all win. We all win. And I think for me, it's my absolute moral obligation, and especially with the privilege that I have and the privilege that I do move with in the world, it's my job, my obligation to fight for those in our community who do not have platforms, who are not protected, whose voices are not amplified. That more specifically pertains to Black women, and more specifically Black trans women. We're operating in these spaces where we have this platform and we have these privileges, but we're not creating spaces and allowing that space to be taken up by voices in our community who do not have those platforms. So yeah, like I said, I think to me, it means to be unwavering. And you know what? People are not gonna like what you have to say, but at the end of the day, or what you have to do at the end of the day, my goal, just like all of the other Black women who have already spoke and who have spoken before me and who will speak after me, you know, like, we're in a time and a space where we have to get things done. And like I said, when Black women and Black trans women occupy those spaces, everybody wins. Everybody wins. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Nikki. And I appreciate you saying just having spaces for inclusiveness and really just having opportunities when you have those opportunities to amplify those voices that aren't heard. And so I really appreciate you highlighting and acknowledging that. And so I'd like to pass on to Joseph Cotton.
Wow, good evening. Good to see those who I'm acquainted with and those who I'm not acquainted with. This is a tough act to follow here. These ladies have really shined out there, but I can handle it. To our political elected officials, my hat is off to each one of them, especially Councilwoman Moore, who's down in rural New Mexico, as I am. I know I've spoken with her before. She has a tough area there, and we're definitely going to work to get her some support. Thank Representative Cheryl for many, many years of service, and hats off to Senator Pope, who I think is going to take us in a different direction, is going to do a great job representing the state and representing the people of the state. The question at hand is, what does being a Black community advocate mean to me? It means, as Ms. Davis said, it means the world to me. This was not how I was set out to be, but raising my boys down here in rural New Mexico told me that I needed to get involved, and I wanted to be that father that stood with his kids, unlike my father did with me. But I wanted to be that parent. I wanted to be that parent. If I had to take cookies to the school, I wanted to take cookies to the school. But I wanted to be that parent, to be there, to be that voice when my boys come home and tell me something went wrong at school or something went wrong in the community. So that voice that led me on a journey, and I haven't left that journey yet. I got involved with the NAACP under some strong, elderly, hard women, and they taught me well, and they were great leaders, and I appreciate them for that. But you know, I hear voices. I hear we have to become one voice in communities. It's not whether you're a male voice, female voice, trans, whatever you choose to be, but there's strength in numbers, and we all start singing the same song. We can be on different tunes and let our voices be heard. We can get a lot done. But somehow, working in a rural area, the biggest thing I say, it's not about me. It's about the change that we make when we sit at the table. It's about the change that we make when I'm advocating for someone. So it's not what I think should happen, it's what we all think should happen. So when we come together more and we have conversations without getting offended with each other and letting each other say their piece, we can get a lot, and we can make a lot of changes. So that's a really, really good question, because if it's about me, then advocacy would mean nothing. So it's about what's better for the area and the space that we're in right now. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Joe. And I really appreciate you just highlighting that unity aspect, because again, we have to come together and amplify each other's voices in a way that's very collective. And once you have that, then there's a type of synergy type energy that we get. So I appreciate that. And I'd like to turn it over to Nichelle.
Thank you so much, Devin, and thank you, everyone. It's been really great to hear all of your responses. I feel blessed to be here with you. Thank you to our elected officials again for sharing your stories and your experiences. It was a rich conversation, and I appreciate being able to lay witness to that. As far as being a community organizer, I am new in this space, right? But I can tell you what it means to me. It comes with a great sense of responsibility. And for me, it is resting a lot on leadership development and developing that advocacy skill set for families and individuals to advocate on behalf of themselves, their families, and their community, right? For me, it means these deep personal relationships where we're developing trust alongside one another, right? Because as the theme right here, as we're talking about unity, bringing those voices together to raise systems level change, to build power, we do that as a unit, and we do that in community with one another. So those deep personal relationships are really meaningful to me. Also listening and facilitation. I love to be in space where we can share stories with one another and realize that we are connected in more ways that we might have anticipated as we continue to grow this movement. And so if I can facilitate a conversation or be a part of a conversation where collaboration is unearthed or it gives way to action, that's the goal. But it's a calling, right? And it's a responsibility. And Nikki, I appreciate what you said about allowing Black women to lead. It's a different type of leadership, right? And you're right, we get things done. And as we continue to widen our shoulders and accept responsibility and lead the way, I really feel confident that we will lay witness to the type of change we want to see. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nichelle. And again, I just like to point out just the listening aspect and that creating those safe spaces for just being able to be transparent with one another. I think that's so powerful. And so I appreciate you mentioning that. And I'd like to turn it over to Torrance.
Being a community organizer to me, I mean, really, it's by any means necessary. And I keep finding myself saying that more and more every week, every month, is what we all know what the goal is. We all know what we need. We all know what we want. We need to work together just to accomplish it. You don't got to like it. You don't got to care how it looks. Let's get it done. And that's not going to be done without any of the unity and without being able to work together and support each other.
Thank you. And yes, I love that by any means necessary. Like, you just have to get it done. And when we work together, we get it done, boots to the ground, we find a way. And as Black people, we're amazing, we're resilient, and we always will find a way. And so I'd like to go ahead and go to the next question. So many people use in their advocacy the number of people impacted as a reason to get leaders to listen. In New Mexico, where African Americans are 3% of the population, how do you get leaders to invest in change for our African Americans, regardless of our population size? And so I'd like to just go ahead and open it to anybody who would like to answer.
If you don't mind me jumping in,
Yeah.
I think that this narrative of Black folks in a space have to be hurt or brutalized and experience violence on a mass level for it to be of some type of importance. And I think when you look at the systems and the structures of violence that are built up in place to keep Black folks oppressed, those same systems and structures affect marginalized groups as a whole. So I think that it's really critical that, you know, when we're having these conversations about the violence that Black folks experience, even if it's on a micro, not the violence, but the demographic is on a micro level, I think that that shouldn't be the focus. The focus should be that Black folks are experiencing this type of violence and brutalization in what, 2021? And we have consistently experienced this type of violence and brutalization. And we shouldn't have to pull a number card for our humanity to be prioritized, right? And the violence that we're experiencing, like I said, other marginalized groups are experiencing, right? So I think when we remove ourselves from this idea that like we're non-existent because we're not 98% of the population here, or we're not 54% of the population, we will be able to center Black liberation and Black protection and Black safety without having to circulate around this conversation that, oh, well, you're only this much of the population. The point being, Black folks are experiencing violence, they're being murdered, they're being brutalized, and Indigenous people are experiencing the same type of trauma. Immigrants are experiencing the same type of trauma. Trans folks are experiencing the same type of trauma and violence. So I think it's not so. I think it's not so much necessary that we need to be in a space where we can pull a demographic, but more so being in a space where, why are we not paying attention, and why are we not, as a state and as a city in the sense of Albuquerque, why are we not doing things to protect Black folks? And why do we need a number to prove that there's some type of trauma or violence going on?
Tag.
Okay. You go on, Erica.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I know you have something to say, so I'm going to be real brief. I can agree with her, but you know, we don't really need to, we don't have to show our leaders or elected officials what's taking place. It's obvious, especially when you're talking about Black people. We're behind. So what we have to do, and something that I want us to do even more in this community, and then if we bring it together as a whole state, we need to come to the table more and talk about these issues amongst ourselves. And we don't have to have, we can only do it one flower at a time if that's what it takes. We want so much and everybody wants this. But if we just start uniting together and we can just get one piece of the pie at a, we take this piece and then we got it. We go and we do that next fight. Then we do that next fight. Everybody that's at the table may not get their voice heard at the same time. But as long as we're making those changes that need to be made, that impacts our community. We know we have a poverty level. We know we have a educational level. We know what's impacting our children when they go out, and our young parents and stuff. We know this already. So it's not a matter of getting them to listen. They know. We just need to be able to bring it to the table and have that conversation.
So what everybody is saying is the intersectionality of Black folks is real and it exists. And the one thing that the COC is centered in is joyful collaboration. So and with that being said, it shouldn't matter, the percentage is there. The issue is the erasure within the state, okay? The issue is the tricultural myth. The issue is the fact that government and anti-Black racism in New Mexican culture upholds the 3% being erased from spaces. And then when we're talking about intersectionality, and unfortunate, and again, all the unfortunate things that Nikki mentioned, when we're talking about immigration, I don't know if y'all remember, but the whistleblower, Don Wolf, I believe, Don Wooten, for the detainees in ICE when they started sterilizing people and sterilizing birthing bodies, that was a Cameroonian woman, okay? But it was an immigrant. But we forget that we are at all of these intersections, okay? But then when we talk about New Mexican Black politics, the next issue is the misogynoir that exists within our community. The next issue is going to be we can all sing, just to, you know, piggyback off of Mr. Cotton. We can all be singing different keys, but if we flat, it's gross. So how are we going to come together and find the harmony where you can do things in your lane and I can hold this lane down and my lane down? But you have to remember that what's going to infect, and it's in the chat, margin to center. We're going, we have the intersection, and what we had to do in policy work this year was center our Afro-Indigenous, because people keep forgetting that Blackness is at the center of many things in New Mexico. And what we're seeing in policy work is that our Black women and our Black leaders, our Black men, our Black leaders aren't safe at the roundhouse. I watched a woman call the cops on my loved one when she was being a whole expert, okay? When she was all the way in her bag and in her lane, and realizing that that is not a safe space for her. And she's a whole 50 miles from the space that we're making change and supposed to be making policy change. But the fact is that this, unfortunately, our systems uphold the anti-Black racism within New Mexico so deeply so that they can benefit from it in different ways. And then meanwhile, we're fighting over crumbs when we need to burn the whole plantation and we need to burn the whole table down in the first place. So we're over, and I see the chat where I see Miss Dr. McIver talking about where's our Black pack is coming. We're talking about unity. Okay, we also got to figure out, we can't, and my dear friend Ebony said earlier today, you cannot heal where you got sick. We have to figure out the remedies and the healing and what it's going to look like when we can take that 3% and say it doesn't matter, we're still here. Because at the end of the day, is it really 3% in New Mexico? Or are we not going to talk about the problematic issue that the census has always been for Black Americans? So, and knowing that what was happening in West Texas and what that turned into Blackdom and them cutting off the water supply, which forcing them to either die or flee or be robbed. And like, what really is going on in New Mexico's history with Blackness? So I don't think that until the 3% can say it doesn't matter, it's 3, we out here and you gonna hear us and you're gonna deal with us. And you're also gonna honor the things that we require for our community, because until we're free, nobody's free. It's going to have to, it doesn't matter. This 3% is going to have to just, it's 3%. We're here. We have to stop bending to the erasure.
I want to add that there's nothing micro about racism. We carry the trauma with us from continent to continent, state to state. The systems that we live with internationally are intersected to oppress Black people and institute anti-Black racism and misogyny. So it's structural, and it's throughout the country and it's throughout the world. And just because we're in a space where we're a smaller population doesn't make that any different. For us, in terms of the work that we do around Black maternal health in the state of New Mexico, and we've been advocating for better conditions for Black women and birthing people since 2014, we look at the numbers and we say, if being small should protect us or indicate that we would be doing better, it's not. So there's nothing about being a small population that suggests that we would do better. We are mirroring national trends and our disparate health outcomes, which means whether you're in Chicago or New Mexico, you're in trouble if you're Black. Yeah, racism is institutional, it's international, and it's here.
Thank you. And thank you all for your answers and responses. And before we go to the next question, I'd just like to highlight a huge word that Erica and Sunshine used, which is intersectionality, in the sense that there are multiple things that are going against us as Black people, especially Black women, but as Black people in general. And so I just think that we definitely need to highlight that and really just have an understanding that there are multiple dynamics to the oppression that we deal with, the systemic issues that we deal with, and we have to get to a point to where we have equity in the way we're treated, as opposed to, oh, it's just 3%. And so I appreciate everybody's answer. And I also wanted to, going into the next question, talking about what Joe said, having a seat at the table. We've been hearing a lot of excitement about diversity, equity, and inclusion and a big effort to make sure African Americans have a spot at the table. And so I just wanted to ask you all, how do we join that table and resist tokenized membership at the table? And I'd like to just open it to the floor to anybody.
Yeah, tokenized membership. I should be at the table right now, but I chose to stay here. We have to show our faces. I chose to be with you guys. I should be at my city councilman meeting now. I may not have anything on the agenda. I may not have a voice. I may just want to be there. Sometimes we have to be there to keep them honest. But what we have to stop doing is sometimes we want to be the only one at the table. Sometimes we want to be the only one. I don't. When I get ready to go to, I say, hey man, it's a council meeting tonight. Let's make sure we're there. Sometimes we may have 3 at the school board meeting. We may have 4 or 5 at the councilman meeting. We may even just be in ear in their executive meetings, just being present. So we need to be at the table, and we need to make sure that we're at the table, and we need to hold them accountable to make sure that we're at the table. It's so long, we have to work. See, we work from 8 to 5, and a lot of times in your communities, these meetings are at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock. So we've been missing out of being at the table. Oh, you might get invited to the table with the intent of you not showing up because they know you're on a job. Well, I'm retired now, and I'm at a whole lot of tables unexpectedly. And not just being there, but you want your voice to be heard while you're sitting at the table. And whatever it is, if you are the only one, you want them the rest of them at the table to know that you do have strength behind you, and there's strength in numbers. You may be the only one sitting at the table, but make sure you have, and I believe one of our elected officials said that during their conversation, if you have to come back to this table, make sure you have that strength and that number that you need to make changes. But it's always hard. I told my mayor just a couple of days ago, why in the Black community that everything we want, we gotta fight for? Why can't something just come up and you say, okay, we're gonna do this? If you ever stop and think about it, whenever we're at the table, whatever we're wanting or advocating for, it's a struggle. And then sometimes we have to get ugly or loud or something like that in order to get what we want. We got to change that. And I think the more that we sit at the table, the more opportunity we have to change that.
And the community needs to support the people who actually get to the table. Is we get people there and we walk away, it's like, all right, we did our part, and we'll wait for the next election or the next whatever it is that comes along. Is know what's going on, know what they're participating in, and also talk to them to let them know, hey, this is what we need as a community. Most of the time we usually see people get elected in, and like I said, we all just walk away because we figure we made it there already.
A lot of people, I'm sorry, a lot of people like being the only, unfortunately. Folks, we got to check the people that like being the token. And that's difficult because it's rough when you go into space and you see, and then we also have to demand that there's more than token opportunities available. That you require. I said this at the George Floyd Memorial with my cousin Torrance. Black people are not a monolith. So when you have one seat, that does not matter because their lived experience might be different from someone else's. And again, to echo Mr. Joseph Cotton, it's also problematic that these meetings pop off when we're at work. I just watched City Council sneak a cannabis meeting on the 17th while we're prepping for Juneteenth. And we should be at the table for these things. Like, I'm just going to name all the things, y'all. Start watching for these meetings, because we also have to check the people that like being the token and the problematic gatekeepers. So this is going to take some intergenerational healing. This is going to take some acknowledgement of there are bridges to be crossed and no longer burned or rebuilt. Because I can't take you in the room with me if you got a knife in my bag. What good is that gonna do? And that's a big thing within our community. And the other part is the COC that I am so deeply proud of is we said we got our own table. And when we decided to start bringing people in to be allies with us and figure out if they were gonna be allies or accomplices, we said you could have a seat at our table. Now what? and the demand is a whole different deal. So when we come together, and the COC has only been in existence for literally under a year. And the moves and waves that have been made by 27 Black femme leaders across the state of New Mexico, supporting our champions that we just saw, is critical and proof that we can do it. It's proof that if we just say, yo, that didn't work for us. And just like Mr. Cotton said, checking for his boys, right? When they're coming home saying something's wrong at school. The Crown Act really got kicked off because the Free the Hair Act got going because I recall having to go step in and do advocacy for an 8th grade girl in 2020 while I'm supposed to be at the session in February. You remember that, Devin? I had to leave session, go back and talk to these people who try to suspend a baby for her hair that was like this in 2020, y'all. So like this is where we can't afford the tokenization anymore. We have to want all of us there. And we also have to rid the scarcity mentality, because when I win, you win. And you also need to make sure that I got eyes on you, so that if somebody is harming you or hurting you or taking advantage of you, blackmailing you, whatever, because it's wild in these streets. You heard our leaders. You need to make sure that we got eyes on you so that we can cover you too. In true community, it's transparent and honest and forthright. And the other thing is sometimes we gonna beef, but that's family business. It's gonna be what it's gonna be. We can't all be vegans in that. Beef, turkey, whatever, chicken, tofu, we got to bring it all to the table to figure it out at the end of the day, so that we can do right because it has nothing to do with us. It has everything to do with these babies that are going to be left to come up in New Mexico behind us.
Yes, thank you. And
Can I share, Devin? I just wanted to say also that because it is 2021, it is important to build our own tables like we've done historically as part of our survival and advancement here. That's really what's gotten us anywhere, is having our own tables. And then also we get to prep the table. Like, we're not desperate. We don't have to go sit at a table that is hostile, that is full of microaggressions, that doesn't want us, and call that power. That's not power. That's actually creating more health disparities and killing more Black women and people. So it's not a good idea. And we have a right to prep tables. So in the kind of legislation that we were blessed to help pass this year, we said no less than 2 from each marginalized community at this table. We said everyone at the table has to receive trauma-informed thinking and trauma-informed care training, including the trauma of racism. We said people who hold leadership positions at this particular table that we were working on integrating in 2021 have to be people who are not only hold high-level degrees, but have lived experience. So prep the table. And part of the way that we work to prep the table is that for years, I refused to sit at the table because I wasn't going to sit there alone in a hostile environment that wasn't made for me. So sometimes we have to say, no, fix your table before we show up, and then we take our people with us when we finally go. We're not desperate. We might be hurt and wounded and marginalized, but we don't have to be desperate, Black people.
Thank you. Thank you for all your responses. And before we go to the next question, I'd like to just give space for Nichelle to talk.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I'm inspired by hearing all the messaging around accountability and, repeating what Senator Pope said, that this is our table. We're not asking for a seat at the table. This is our table. And so claiming space there and being vocal in those spaces is really important, and helping to guide those expectations, right? Once at the table, shaping and guiding those conversations in benefit and in service of our communities. So that, as we develop these networks and these relationships while we're there, like everyone has said, the next meeting, the next table, we are there together, and we just build and build from there. And so I appreciate the messages around accountability. And Sunshine, I appreciate the reminder that desperation is not a game that we play, right? It's not a space that we need to be in, and that being able to set our own boundaries in service of ourselves and of community is an important thing to remember. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for all the different messages and the unity that you have in the consistency that you have in your responses, not only consistent in what the message is and the inequities that we deal with, but also bringing different aspects and perspectives to that consistency. So I really appreciate that. And so the next question is, coalition building is probably a strong part of what each of you do. When do you think it is important to combine work for African Americans with allies, and when shouldn't we do it?
In my experience, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have been doing this a lot longer than I have, but I have my mileage. But what I've noticed in organizing, and this is unfortunate, is that my own personal experience, I exhausted myself, and I think this does play a little bit into tokenism, right? I've exhausted myself trying to center other groups of folks. And it's not that it's not important, right? I think that it's very important to center Indigenous people and, so on and so forth. But what I've noticed is that when it comes to Black folks, we are never a priority. We are never put in a space where, all right, this is what we're gonna focus on. This is what we're gonna do. We're centering Blackness. We're centering Black folks. This is what we're doing. And it brings me back to George Floyd and how all of these protests were going on. And it was crazy to see. I mean, there was a protest that happened with a young Black boy. It was his first organizing his first protest. And basically what happened is his voice got drowned out. Other non-Black folks took over that space, claimed it as their own, exploited that pain and trauma for whatever benefit they wanted or they had. I mean, they could mean well, whatever. And I consistently see this play out where Black people show up all the time. We show up, we show out for other groups of people. But when it comes to people prioritizing us, it doesn't seem to be on the top of their list. So what I've decided that I'm gonna do is I am an ally, 100%. I support these folks. I do what I can to help them. But when I am centering Black, when I go into the field in a space to center Blackness, that's exactly what I'm gonna do. And I let people know this is not a space for you. Don't center yourself. It's not about you. Any march I've ever done, any protest I've ever done, I let allies know. It's not about you, because I think what happens is a lot of times people center themselves without really realizing they're centering themselves. So I think there are spaces and organizations for that. And I think how I bring those individuals in is I ask for allies. I ask for allies to be involved in that. If I'm not asking for you, if I'm not checking for you, chill out. Sit down, sit back, listen. You're here to listen, to understand, not to be heard. And I think that it's important. I think in a lot of spaces, I see Black folks who are afraid to take that space, right? To say, hey, look, it's not about you. But I think allies and I think other marginalized groups of people need to hear that. They need to know, what we need and what we want. And from my interaction in those spaces, it's a very responsive space. There are organizations who bring everybody in. That's just not my focus, because I truly 100% believe when Black folks are liberated, when we have equity, when we do not have to be afraid to go outside, I honestly think everything else will follow. Everything else will follow. We will see the liberation of Indigenous folks, and we're friends in that same fight. We're allies in that fight. Like I said, I don't want people to think entering spaces, Indigenous spaces or LGBTQ plus spaces and claiming that space is okay. No, because that space is centered for those groups at that time, right? But when it is a space or a protest or an event or anything centering Blackness needs to be centered, right? And on top of that, the most marginalized Black voices, Black individuals need to be centered. And I think once we all are in the same space, and we don't have to, I think that's another huge thing. We don't have to settle for anything less than that. Because like I said, we show up, we show out time and time and time again. Back in 2017, when we did the first like official BLM march here in Albuquerque, I spent my like literally college years organizing for other organizations, right? Multiple organizations here that are have a very good following. When it came time to back me, no one wanted to back me. Nobody. All those organizations that I exhausted myself for, right? They were like, it's just not a concern for me. I've interned at organizations where they tell me, we're here, we're centering things, but Blackness was not my identity, who I am as a person, how I navigate through the world was not a priority. Yeah. So I think that we don't always have to allow people into those spaces. We don't always have to say, oh, well, people might not come if it's not, it's not for everybody. Some things are not for everybody, and that's okay. And when we're in those spaces, there's nothing wrong with us saying, hey, we're claiming this space. We deserve that.
Yeah. So I want to just piggyback real quick and say that it's sometimes not the time for allies and accomplices, because performative allyship is a thing. And it's a very dangerous thing at this juncture. And also to name those spaces that Nikki has mentioned, Black bodies are the founders and mothers and fathers of those movements. So the LGBTQ space, thank you, Mother Marsha P. Johnson and Mother Sylvia. Like, I mean, those are the mothers of reproductive justice. There's 12 of them and only one of them has transitioned and they're actually still with us. So like, let's be real clear about these movements that have been co-opted and to make whiteness feel good about themselves and their mediocrity and their BS Facebook posts or their $2 when they know they got 20 grand for us. So a lot of time, or 20 grand. I mean, like there's so much that goes into that. And just sometimes this isn't the time to have allies, and it is perfectly fine. And I have been in countless spaces where it's like, no, this wasn't for you. We said Black folks. And yeah, it's whatever, it rubs folks the wrong way, but it just is what it is. And lastly, just, we can trust ourselves. We can trust our cellular knowledge. We can trust everything that our foremothers and forefathers have laid before us. We can trust that sometimes, as Sunshine had said earlier, the lived experience actually exceeds the degree. How are you writing things from this standpoint and lens that you've never experienced? So like that School of Hard Knocks, that lived experience is even more juicy, if you will. It's even more real. It is just what it needs. We are our own medicine. And we have to sit with that and be cool with that and not sell each other out when it's convenient.
I also think it's just the opportunity for us to check who our allies are, right? Who we're calling our allies. People showing up in a space expecting to be taught, expecting to be shown, expecting to, I don't know, have a medal in the oppression Olympics. It's an opportunity for us to really say to ourselves, who is showing up as an ally, right? Because I feel like in authentic allyship, discussions around, this is the issue that we're centering, this is the community that we're centering, this is the power that we're building, it kind of seems like that would be deflated if allies were true allies, right? So keeping in mind who we're inviting into the space and to share in this movement alongside of us.
Yes, and I know Sunshine, you want to say something really quick?
Yeah, I'm going to be real brief. I have to agree with these ladies on what they're saying. We a lot of times we feel like we have to have someone with us. If we're fighting a Black issue, let's fight that issue. Let's demand some things. For years, so many people have benefited off the coattails of Black people. So if we win, they really win, whether they're there or not. But there are issues and times where we just have to stand our ground and do what's best for us and stop feeling like we have to bring someone else in, or don't let someone else manipulate us to bringing someone else in because, well, if you bring this group in, you can get this. Sometimes you have to just say no. So I definitely have to agree with what's been said so far. It's been well said.
I think authentic relationships are a wonderful way to collaborate. I think when the relationships aren't authentic, that becomes the challenge, and then we can find ourselves being tokenized or being asked to, sorry for the noise, work in a way that's out of integrity. So I actually like collaborating. It doesn't challenge me around centering Black women, which is the work that I do. But I need to be in authentic relationship with whomever I'm collaborating with. And authenticity, when it comes to collaboration and movement, also means being accountable for the harm that we've done to one another along the way, including the harm that our ancestors have participated in, whether they were victims and are perpetrators. And often we play both roles, right? If you think about life, we kind of wear both shoes. So I think that relationships are incredibly important, but they just need to be authentic, and they are ancestral. And nothing starts in this moment. Everything has a history. So that's my position on it. But as a Black woman, all I do is center Black women. And I don't care what space I'm in or who I'm working with. That's not a challenge for me.
Thank you. And I'd like to open the space for Torrance. Did you have anything that you want to add to this?
In terms of allies, honestly, nobody knows better for us and is going to do better for us than us. And I find the most peace and I'm able to be the most productive when I'm working with my people. I call Erica 2-3 times a week and we get it done. I call Nicole, and these are not my allies, these are my peers. I don't have to go anywhere else to get the support and the help because everything that I do and everything I need comes from my community and the people that are around me.
Thank you. And as we begin to wrap up with our last two questions, I just want to again say thank you all for the amazing responses that you have. This is very powerful, and I can just tell you for myself, I got my hair standing up on my arms and all of my skin just from hearing the responses. So I really appreciate all the amazing things that you're saying. And so I'd like to go to the next question. What ways would you like to see others get involved? I'd like to open the floor to anybody who would like to answer.
Oh,
So I think,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm.
All right, you're on mute. Okay. Am I going?
Yeah, go ahead, Nikki.
A huge thing that I cannot emphasize enough is youth. Youth. That is a lot of my background, working with youth, and just as I'm healed in these spaces, working with youth, I'm healed in those spaces. I have hope. It brightens my day. I think helping them obtain platforms and things like and spaces and occupying those types of spaces. I can't emphasize it enough. The same thing when they lead. We win. We win. I've seen it happen. I've been a part of it. And not only that, when we're in those spaces, taking a step back and letting them lead, right? Because I think I've seen that a lot where, ageism comes into play. We're in these spaces. We think we know the best. We think we know the most because we're older and things like that. But I've seen the most beautiful things happen when we create space for youth, especially Black youth. I've seen them blossom and grow. And I'm telling you, when I talk to someone my age, I'm like, I'm worried for the future because this is a little whack. But when I talk to these kids, man, I'm just like, I'm so thankful that I even get to see that. So I think just allowing them space and listening to them and using the resources and networking that we have so they can create and they can establish things that we have yet to do, right? And they're well on their way. So I think we should all create space for that, especially Black youth.
Well said. I agree. Hey, one thing I'd like to say is I'd love to see young people get more involved. But in order to get young people more involved, sometimes we just we get so comfortable in our space, in our position, where we're not willing to move over and allow them that space so they can shine because we're too busy shining. So I think sometimes when things have run its course, we need to know when enough is enough and quit being possessive, because I may be the president of the NAACP. This is not my NAACP. This is our NAACP. This is the community's NAACP. This NAACP belongs to the people. So getting people involved and not mind sharing that space and that time with them, showing up at high school games, showing up at their plays and different events, whether you know them or not, but they may be aware of you and say, hey, I know him from, and they see you there. And having more voter registrations, we just have to not be selfish in our space and just open the door so everybody can come in and flourish. And one day I want to be able to just be sitting at home listening to stuff like this, knowing that someone has taken it and ran with it, and the work is still revolving and still going. So we just have to give in to that space and make sure that we're not making it all about us.
Yes,
I
thank
think
you.
how can you help? Find your people. I mean, Black is not a monolith, so find your people and then take care of business with your people with whom you resonate. The other thing is that if you're seeing any of us and you haven't had a one-on-one conversation with us, take the time. Like, I'm so moved to want to speak to people who I haven't gotten with before, because I want to know what you're up to. I want to know if you're part of my immediate tribe around how we do the work and the work that we're doing. So when we find our people, we're able to build movement. Relationships are the capital of movement.
Yes, thank you. I'll go ahead, Tarch.
I would say, speaking specifically to Albuquerque and the community in Albuquerque, is we need to find some way to heal our community and the leaders in our community first. And that's the first step for us, actually finding a way to be successful in the year coming in the future.
But is healing meaning that they probably need to sit down somewhere and go heal, though?
Erica, I'm just saying,
I mean, this is, if we don't talk, let's talk, because I agree. Like, there's so much healing what happens when your broken pieces cut me and bleed off? What happens when these babies can't trust you? What happens when, like, my favorite thing about Juneteenth this weekend was babies that I couldn't even place were like, hi. And I was like, oh, snap. Hi, baby. Good to see you. But like, they know me from being in every school in the 33 counties of the state of New Mexico. They know me because I've done suicide prevention and healthy relationship and cyber safety, cyberbullying. Like, they also can teach us some things. And it's not so much the kids. We also just have to make sure that when Audre Lorde, our great and mighty ancestor, Audre Lorde, said, caring for yourself is self-love, is an act of political warfare. We're not supposed to expire in the work. We're not supposed to max out in the work. So we need to lean on one another, and we need to be able to tag in, tap out, and I do that often. I do that so much. Like, hey, not this week. I'm off the clock. And it's being able to take that time to rest and recalibrate so that you can come from your highest and best self in this work, because you don't know who you might be silencing, snuffing out, because you might be operating from a space that is a smidge toxic, like unfortunately a lot of times we see. But I'm hoping to see, again, more people at the table, getting more involved, and it's a two-way street, like Sunshine said. Being a connector is my favorite thing in life. I'm a connector. It just is what it is. It's gonna be what's gonna be. And it's necessary, because if I don't know who has it, I'm gonna find out who does, and that's always been who I am. And the other part is I'm humble enough to operate to say, if I don't know who got it, I'm gonna find who does, and I'll link you with them. So I think that there's also some reciprocity in relationship building that's required. And then also just really truly seeing if we see each other and calling in instead of calling out. Because I can't tell you how many times, even in this space, that I could call folks out, but for the fact that I know I want to make sure that I'm operating in my highest self and doing what needs to be done for future generations, to have safe space to clear the way for them. I'm gonna fight these battles on the side, but know that I got it. But I'm also gonna come back and do the work. You can't get rid of that.
Thank you. And were there any more responses before we go to the last question? Perfect. Thank you. And thank you again. This is just so powerful and amazing. And I just love the conversation that we're manifesting and building. And so I really appreciate all of your responses. And so going into our last question, how should we build political engagement with our local governments? I'd like to open the floor.
That should have been the first one we tackled, right? You know, I appreciated a lot of the conversation that was had with our elected officials, talking about program, talking about mentorship, talking about providing support for those who are interested in serving in public office, right? I also think about how I feel about politics and the roundhouse personally. And it's hard for me because I feel like we can do this mentorship and this work to get people into these positions, but it is always a question of how do you hold people accountable? And it's always about, I don't know if you feel this way sometimes when you're in Santa Fe, I feel like there is stuff dripping off the walls that I want nothing to do with, right? So how do we protect those who are in service against what has been built and the oppressive system that has been built around politics? So I struggle in this space. I do think the mentorship is helpful, obviously, like Senator Pope mentioned, as did Representative Stapleton. We are one of the, if not the only state that doesn't have a paid legislature, right? So being able to pay these individuals for their time, creating access to these spaces as well. But I just really seek to see some change in the system itself, because it almost feels, I don't even know what word I would use. Maybe it doesn't feel genuine to send someone into the space when I feel like the space needs so much work.
Absolutely. So go ahead, Mr. Joe.
It's either going to be so locally, and what I think is accountability, holding my local officials here accountable. And in order to know how to hold them accountable is knowing what the policies are and the charters are in your community. So going to City Hall saying, you know, getting a copy of the charter, getting a copy of the policies, especially when it's dealing with law enforcement and different things like that. So showing up at your council meetings and stuff, that you're engaging now in that political world with them, other than them knocking on your door only to ask you for their vote when they haven't yet come to see if there were any needs that you need. And down in rural New Mexico is usually, we come in ones. We're gonna have one Black city council, one school board member, one this. So this advocacy is very important to help them get what they want. So I think the biggest thing is accountability and knowing that you have that voice and they know you have that voice to be reckoned with, if I could say, that's going to hold them accountable and make them look at these things. So knowing what your policies are, knowing what the rights and the wrongs are in your community, and then you'll know what to advocate for. I'll say this real quick story, right? During the George Floyd, where everything was taking place, I thought I knew some of the ins and out at the police department. So I went down and had a look at what their day-to-day policy is, not the state charter or what's mandated, a state statute, but what our local. So we were able, it was like a week later, they were getting ready to renegotiate the contract. So we were able to make some changes in that policy before that happened. And it was in writing before, and no one even had to know. But I mean, the lawyer and I would sit down, we'd talk, we'd say, so it's just a matter of changing a word because it makes all the difference in the world. So we were able to make some changes right before the new contract came up. So staying in touch, staying engaged, accountability, and holding your elected officials are your people that we're paying in these positions to do their job, is just making sure. Sometimes we can just call down there and request something just to be requesting. Let them wonder why you want it. And that'll keep us engaged. So
this is a really like a fresh question in a way that is a little raw for me, because in trying to keep people accountable, sometimes people take accountability as hostility, especially non-Black representatives. So there's so much to be done in the face of and staying engaged. And I think some things that we can do is begin to look at some things that the COC we're looking into is tracking and being sure, and for all of you too, redistricting is coming up. That's where the gerrymandering BS happens, right? That's where we don't see proper representation. But then we see that 6 BIPOC people ran for Honorable Madam Secretary Hallen's seat, and we still sent a white lady. I know that the word this is being recorded, but I'm sorry. The issue is that how in the face of, it's like, what in the name of racial justice are y'all doing? So there's so many questions to be had about, and then calling in when it's like, but wait, these individuals haven't even sat with us or spoke to us. How are you what? So like, to know the levels of literal representation on the Hill, to what's going to happen when they reconfigure these maps and these spaces with these percentages that don't reflect us. If we're 3% for the state, you should see what those percentages look like for the maps. And shout out to Ms. Moore again and again and again and again for holding it down, and a majority leader for holding it down. And you should hear, to echo Nichelle Gilbert, the ickiness that oozes from the roundhouse. It's real. I don't want to send nobody in where I know where it's not safe. And it's so difficult to know. So the hard part is finding ways for us to build power and capacity, and doing so by just merely having the knowledge to not get played over and over again, even when it comes to holding a party line.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, go ahead, Nikki.
I just want to say, I agree, especially with Erica and Michelle. I want to say that I'm not happy with the current system. It's not, it's one of those things, you know, it's really hard to have any type of celebration or celebratory, like, you know, anytime something, you know, one of us is put in these types of spaces. I'm not happy with the system, but I do appreciate what those are doing in those places that, I mean, like Erica said, Michelle said, it's gross. Because I know if I go in there, I'm going to be wild and acting crazy. So I do appreciate what it takes to be in those spaces and speaking for us. You know, what I will say too is, maybe it's just me being a little bit impatient, but I think that we got to stop accepting the bare minimum. This is things that, I mean, Juneteenth on a national level, bare minimum, you know, and it's not going to stop Black folks from celebrating. You know, I am so amazed that I come from such resilience. But the bare minimum is not good enough for me. I'm tired of people telling me that I should tell my people that I'm happy with the bare minimum. This is good. This is great. Yeah, we have some wins and things like that, and I'm very grateful. So much goes into that work. But some of those things are the bare minimum. And like Mr. Khan said, we got to hold these people accountable. We have to be in these spaces where we're holding them accountable and letting them know this is not going to fly. Because, I mean, as the saying goes, we got the power. We do. We just need to utilize that. And I'm sick of being in the spaces where I'm told, yeah, you should be happy with this. You should be happy. Basically, we should be happy that and we are, right? We should be happy that we're not being murdered, and we are, right? So this ideology that, like, you know, and I have conversations like this with allies all the time where it's like, you know, the whole situation with George Floyd, yeah, of course, everybody wanted to see that man convicted, right? Everybody did. But at the end of the day, what happened a few hours later? A young Black girl protecting herself was murdered. So these are pivotal moments for us, and we're taking steps forward, but what does it mean if we're taking 20 steps back, right? So once we stop saying we're okay with crumbs, we're okay with the bare minimum, and we're enforcing that in these spaces, and we're saying, look, you're here, you're gonna give us what we should have, and it's not the bare minimum. We're not okay with that. We're not okay with just sliding by with some crumbs to shut us up, to keep us quiet.
But I want to affirm you real quick on going in there and saying you being like, wow, whatever. The Respect New Mexico Coalition finally invited Black Health New Mexico to the table this year, which was beautiful and wonderful, because now there's three Black women at the table in this statewide space. But the thing about Black leadership and Brown leadership is that what they translate as accountability to being hostility, and how we handle family business and how we've always handled business is, as my big sis Alexandria Taylor says, is we just go straight to the root, and folks aren't comfortable with that, and people need to get comfortable with that, because so long. And the other part of this complexity is the fact of staying engaged, and that's why rest is important and joy is critical, because we will be snatched, our spirit will be snatched from our bodies if that's what they want, and that's what they want. But we have to find rest, and we have to center joy, because folks love to see, stop bleeding for folks and just stay engaged and be like, you know what, I saw that. Pick your battles and take a battle buddy with you, but also stay at the root of it. It's okay to do this at somebody verbally on Twitter. It's okay to let them know that, hey, I see you and that was foul. They're not going to like it, but guess what? Now they got to move different. But the other point is Black and Indigenous leadership and Black and Brown leadership is just flat out different than white supremacist norms to keep us silenced, to deal with the Constitution that never included us, to deal with all these pieces of, like, when we go to Santa Fe, Black folks, you feel away because we're literally staying in a space that is oppressor territory. And we're over here thriving in spite of, with our ancestors, thank God, but we know what it is. And so we have to have each other's backs and see each other, but don't silence yourself, because it's so necessary to get to the root. Because when we play games with going around the merry-go-round with policy, that's how we can't miss out on cannabis. We can't miss out on paid family medical leave. We can't miss out on childcare. We can't miss out on better healthcare. Like, we have to get and stay to the root. So stay there and keep these people on their toes in their crazy looking shoes and awkward looks on the hill.
If Devin, if I may, you know, most of the time we don't have to be the aggressor all the time when we're at the table. And like some of you ladies have said, well, that's not your, and that's good to know where you're at, where you stand, and what you can have a discussion about in a calm manner, and what you can't have a discussion about. After we've sat at the table, and I tell people all the time, okay, this is trip 3. So now trip 1 and trip 2 are okay. The third trip, we really getting ready to have that tough conversation that most people get offended by because they think we're being hostile or something like that. But it took us 3 times to get to this point. So everyone knowing their role and knowing their what role they can play is important, or knowing where I would step back if I think I'm going to hurt the situation and allow Erica, maybe this is for you to go talk to him, or Sunshine, or Michelle, or Terrence. Okay, you go, you handle this, because I don't think I'm going to handle it right. It's sometimes we need to know where we're at with that, and we need to be big enough to move it on and say, okay, yeah, that's not me. That's more Erica, or more Terrence, or Sunshine, or somewhere, or Nikki, or Michelle, or someone, but not me, just not me. but I'll be here to support you if you need me. And we need to find that space and time.
Those are authentic relationships, right? When we can show up for each other and take care. And it doesn't mean that it's easy. And if I can't take care of Erica, I might ask Joe, can you get with Erica? Or if I don't really know Nikki, I might say, Nichelle, can you work with Nikki? So it's not kumbaya. It's actually strategy. And also I'm so curious about this thing about the table. Like I'm a little, I sometimes I wonder.
Just let me tell you about Jesus. He flipped tables, and I'm down to do the same thing. So we can just get it
Sam,
done.
I'm not about the I came out picking.
Do it that way. I mean, because the other part is it has never served us.
You don't eat at a table where the food is poison. So maybe we just need to do something different. Or at the very least, bring your own food with you to the table for you and your people.
Well, every time you're at the table doesn't mean you're going to the table to eat. You could be, I mean, you could be the one that have called this, and you want some results.
That's your table, Joe. When you call it. No, when you call it, that's your
It's
table.
my table. That's right. That's why it's the table.
So that's but a lot of times when we talk as Black folks and marginalized people about the table, we're talking about a white-led entity that wasn't built for us and it's bent on our destruction. So I'm just gonna recommend that we pace ourselves, and to Erica's point, really care for ourselves and one another. And that doesn't mean that we're any less committed or effective to the movement. Caring for ourselves and one another means that we can actually get out of this insanity paradigm that we've been running around in for centuries.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. And I'd like to say thank you for all your amazing responses to all the different questions that we had. This has been very powerful, amazing, phenomenal. And this is, I feel like, very mobilizing for our people and getting the work that we need to get done. And so I really appreciate you all taking the time. And so I'd like to end it again saying this has been such an excellent opportunity to hear the community advocates and activists. And we thank you all for the work that you're doing and amplifying the voices through your experiences and through your positions and through all the work that you're doing for our community. And with that, I'd like to also say, please join us on the 24th at 5 and on the 25th at 3 for the State of the Black State address, where we talk about a lot of different inequities that are going on and just provide an opportunity for transparency on what our community is going through. And with that, I'd like to say thank you again, good night, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.